Well, welcome everyone, and excited to have you here at our second inaugural Sustainability Symposium series. My name is Kim Smith. We're going to be focusing today on arts and activism, and we have a wonderful, wonderful group of folks to share their inspirations and talents with you. Again, welcome to GPSEN's Sustainability Symposium series. I'd like to introduce you to our amazing board president and the head of Portland State University's Student Sustainability Center, Serena Dressel. Serena, take it away.
Thank you, Kim. So welcome again to everyone. And today's Sustainability Symposium is part of our speaker series that follows the same collective theme as our previous event. Our first event took place a month ago, the week of the 50th Earth Day celebration, and it followed the theme, A Call for Action, recognizing that now is a time for action for the benefit of all, and that we want to celebrate those in our communities who are making a difference. And so we are looking at the Sustainable Development Goals in all of our events. We are looking at how environmental, economic, and social justice are important grounding principles for thinking through an important sustainable future and looking at the resilience of our communities during these times. So today's conversation will continue looking at the role of action in these times and in a sustainable future. Today's theme is arts and activism. We will be looking at how art and artists are changing our world through artistic creations and performance art. So we are asking, why does art matter? What is the role of art in a changing world? And how can art serve a sustainable future? We will consider the role of artists as educators and facilitators of public engagement. And we've invited a number of artists here today to help share their work and facilitate that conversation. So for today's program, which is also in the chat box, we will begin with some opening remarks. Shortly after I'm speaking, Kim will transition us into the presentations. And like I said, there will be several artists who are joining us today. That will be followed by time for a question and answer with the audience, and then closing remarks by our executive director.
Great, thank you so much, Serena. So the Sustainable Development Goals, most of you are, I mean, maybe some of you are not familiar with these. These were accepted by the United Nations and all countries, including the United States, in 2015. These are 17 goals that include social issues to help, so people and prosperity issues along that second line, and planet. And some of the topics you're going to be hearing about will be addressing some of these issues. And goal 16, peace, justice, and strong institutions, and 17, partnerships, are really key in helping us understand the mechanisms for how to achieve these. The second thing to keep in mind that we're excited about is the launch just this month, really, of the new ESD for 2030 decade. And so from 2020 to 2030, we're really identifying the power of education and the role that sustainability education in particular must play in terms of public awareness, training, and of course, formal education too. But really, all of us today, this important educational opportunity to learn about how we can have a sustainable future. So we're really grateful to have some incredible leaders joining us today. Next up, we have David Lichtenstein. He's an amazing performer. We've seen, many of us, I hope some of you have seen him perform before in his Leapin' Louie comedy shows. Dave has made a living performing as Leapin' Louie for 30 years and as a volunteer with Clowns Without Borders for 20 years. So he's going to be educating us about, it's so touching how laughter can help people heal from trauma. So David, would you like to take it away?
Yeah. Hello, loving and generous peoples of the planet. Anybody else out there in semi-quarantine freaking out a little bit because of the state of the world? I thought I would just address the elephant in the room a little bit there. Things are getting a little bit hot out there. And I'm not just talking about this wonderful Portland weather. So I've been working with Clowns Without Borders as a volunteer part-time for 20 years. I think I'll just pull up a video right away and show it to you. Clowns Without Borders sends professional performers to do performances and workshops in refugee camps, war zones, and areas of crisis all over the world. And I'm going to show you the last project I was involved in personally, which was a year ago in the Balkans. And we have this wonderful, now you're seeing my messy screen there, right? So let's put this on full screen. There we go. A wonderful performer, Sabine Choucair, a Lebanese clown, has organized lots of projects for us for Syrian refugees in Lebanon, in Jordan, and she also follows the refugee trail into Europe. So that's what we were doing here. And most of our shows on this trip were for young men who had been trying to cross the border for years. In this video, we're actually performing for in Romania.
That sounds great.
So that's what we do. We bring shows and workshops to the people who need to laugh most. Our old slogan is "No child without a smile." And as I've been looking over some of these old projects, I just feel so glad to be here because I've gotten emotional remembering how important these old projects are in my life and how much I've grown. So Clowns Without Borders USA is one of 15 Clowns Without Borders organizations in the world. And you'll notice in that video that we have no clown costumes, no circus type clown makeup anyway. For us, clowning comes from the heart. It comes from inside. It's bringing special things of yourself outside and collaborating with other artists to make people laugh. Let's get that screen sharing back on, and I'll show you some pictures while I'm talking. Now, I've had the good luck to make a living doing shows around the world on a professional basis too, doing the Leap and Louie thing. There we go. So this is what I get to do for a living. Lucky, lucky me. And I'm not the only one, because there's a circus and physical theater world that has exploded all over the world. So like when I started, there was a circus school in Paris and a circus school in Moscow, and I think one in China somewhere. And now there's about 1,000 circus schools in Europe, a few hundred in North America, Australia, New Zealand, a few hundred in South America, circus schools all over the world. And social clowning is a way to bring this out to helping people. So Moshe Cohen in this photo is the founder of Clowns Without Borders USA. And this photo was taken by Tortel Poltrona, the founder of Payasos Sin Fronteras in Spain, which was the first Clowns Without Borders org. And I started doing Clowns Without Borders in 1999. Moshe took me and Rudy Galindo to Chiapas during the Zapatista War. And those were such rewarding and changing times. We were playing for various Mayan groups up way high in the mountains of Chiapas. We had to go through army checkpoints, often 2, 3, 4, 5 times a day just to get to these communities. We got good handling the soldiers and telling them what we were doing. Playing for audiences there was so rewarding. I can't forget the super high squealed laughter. And something we learned that often happens on Clowns Without Borders is once you start clowning, people are so into it, so amazing audience that you can't find in rich countries anymore, that they follow you around, and the show is literally never over until you get into a vehicle and drive away. You just have to keep on entertaining and clowning, or at least get used to being watched all the time. Now, we also enjoyed, maybe in those old days, that Clowns Without Borders wasn't really an organization yet. We just held fundraiser shows and in our hometowns, and then bought a ticket and then went and did it. And we did things we can't do now it's real org. Like I brought my 2 small kids on this Chiapas tour, which Naomi Schaefer, executive director of Clowns Without Borders, closes her eyes and holds her head when she thinks the liability on this now. And they got to be part of this, living in, staying in villages way off the beaten road. Now, Clowns Without Borders, actually, we try not to be political. So during the Zapatista War, we played in the, we played for the Zapatista towns, but we also played in the Mexican government pre-supporting towns. We played in the Abeista towns. We play for everybody who needs help. Now we also have a secondary, our goal is to make people laugh and to make children laugh and to make people happy. But we do have a secondary goal of bringing back news of what's happening in other countries to the US, who is often so isolated and doesn't know very well. After I went to a few projects in Chiapas, I started organizing in Chiapas, and then I started organizing Guatemala, where these photos are from. So these are all from a project after Hurricane Stan, which was the same year as Hurricane Katrina, when a few thousand people in Guatemala were killed by hurricanes and roads were wiped out all over the country. So like in that last one, we're on top of a mudslide that covered part of a village and that saved the children housing that's set up in back of us for the village. We're at 7,000 feet, and this is lava dust that's blowing in our ears and eyes. And all these children had little upper respiratory infections from this, and they were a wild audience, super enjoying the show, but also kind of hard to deal with, which happens often enough on Clowns Without Borders projects. they were laughing and having the time of their life. And yet there was also a few kids in the back who were like throwing pebbles and pea shooting us. Playing for these Mayan peoples was such a privilege. You know, I got to really experience and feel the more cooperative style that's in these villages, where people really do share the resources. And that was such a beautiful feeling sometime, and making these people laugh. Now, Clowns Without Borders has different kinds of projects. So the ones I was mostly involved in the old days were just, we go to a crisis zone and we try to make people laugh. And that's really important just on its own, because often in a zone, people are suffering from trauma, where they're after a war, after a natural disaster. They're living in refugee camps. They've got nothing to do. Children are so traumatized that they have a hard time sleeping. And if we can just make them laugh really hard for an hour, that can have a huge effect just on its own in healing. And now we try to do more longer term projects. So in Turkey, in Colombia, beautiful Colombia that has more internal refugees, internally displaced people, IDP in the business, than any other country. And in Palestine, we have long-term projects to train clowns, train physical theater people to do work like we do. So like in Turkey, for example, clowns that we train then go down to the border of Syria and do shows for the Syrian refugees that are, there's like I think 4 million Syrian refugees in Turkey, almost 1 million in Jordan, almost 1 million in Lebanon. Crazy numbers. We also do workshops where we play with caregivers. And I love physical theater work because we are kind of training humans how to be humans sometimes. I mean, when you're training improv, you're training, the basic rule is enter, accept, propose. You enter the stage, you accept whatever the other artists and audience are proposing, and then you propose back. And what a great rule for life. Enter, accept, propose. Or when we're teaching clown, we're often teaching you to learn your own weaknesses, to accept them, and to put them in front and use them as your clown. So just giving workshops to caregivers in how to use their physical theater when they're teaching can be a beautiful thing too. So let's go back on the screen share and go to the most moving project I ever did, which was in Haiti. So I had the privilege of being the first group in Haiti after the earthquake in 2010. And I learned things about laughter there. It was, a lot of people don't know that Quaiti in that earthquake in Little Haiti, so close to the United States. In Little Haiti was probably the largest natural disaster of the last 50 years. Killed something between 220,000 and 300,000 people immediately. There was 1 million people living in the streets. Everywhere we went was filled with tents. Every square piece of open ground anywhere in Port-au-Prince was tents. we spent our first 5 days doing shows for an organization, a Spanish organization that was giving free meals to children during the day. And we would go and there would just be a blue tarp and nothing else out in the ruins. And we would do a show under the blue tarp for 100 or 200 or 300 kids. And then we worked with a medical organization, Handicap International, which is a French organization, and that's and went to every hospital in the Port-au-Prince area. It's a great thing working with Council Without Borders is we meet all these full-time helper organizations that I get to meet them. It's so fascinating. Everybody took this picture because this is the presidential palace. The entire Haiti was the deepest ruins I've ever seen any place in. And we experienced over and over the loudest laughter I've ever seen or heard in my entire life. And we're professional performers, the three of us, Dave, Clay, Leah, Abel, and me. We're good at what we do. But you know, we're not Richard Pryor or Robin Williams in their prime. We're not comic geniuses, but the laughter we were getting from them was louder than anything I've heard. They had the explosive need to laugh. Every square inch of ground was covered with tents. I remember we were just trying to find a place where we could put these 100 kids in a tiny bit of shade, and there was no shade, there was just ruins. And we found a standing wall and put them up there. And then through the show, they were laughing and they would clap, and then their clap would turn into cheers and then into a song, and then they were just singing to us. And this happened over and over in Haiti, that they would slow down the show by turning the clapping into a whole thing of its own. Another show under a blue tarp. We weren't able to film in the medical world very much. That's where we spent most of our time. But here's an example. We're in these small medical tents. 2 of the hospitals we visited were still standing. Most were in tense places. They were in tents. During this time, I literally hugged a few hundred kids with brand new amputations. Cement fell, and we went into these hospitals where very serious injuries just everywhere, and we would usually do a show at the entrance to the hospital because there would often be a couple of hundred people waiting for service, and we would do a huge show at the entrance to the hospital, and then we would go inside and play for the small tents inside. Inside, right? There was we were exhausted from about day 3 on, doing hours and hours of this every day, and then going home, the 3 of us sleeping in a camping tent in a little shelter for foreign workers of Handicap International. And there was no water, so we'd be sweaty and covered with dirt from pratfalls, but we'd get a couple bottles of drinking water and carefully pour them over our heads in the shower. Or Leah liked to do it with baby wipes. Besides getting to help and make people laugh, I just learned so much on these projects. I always encourage people, this kind of work isn't as important as what Doctors Without Borders or Partners in Health does. And yet it's still important so everybody can find their niche to how they can help in the world. Everybody can do it somehow, and it's good to get outside the United States and see the rest of the world a little bit. We work domestically here in the United States. I did a project a few years ago working with recent refugees in Dallas, Texas for a couple weeks and giving workshops to a couple weeks there. Honestly, we often work foreign countries in these great disaster areas because that's where we started. And that's where people just freak out over physical theater, and we can have fun with that. So I want to end with some optimism in these times. This organization, GPSEN, is really tied in to the United Nations directly and to United Nations sustainability goals. And even though things look tough in the United States now, you should remember that the UN set a goal of cutting extreme poverty in half in 15 years in the year 2000. And they think they exceeded that goal, that extreme poverty worldwide was cut in half. Extreme poverty's of a poverty that's a little rare in the United States. It's generally people who spend all the energy just trying to get enough calories to eat. And the world works by the Maslow hierarchy of needs. If you're just trying to get calories, you can't try to do anything better than that. And the goals of the Sustainable Development for 2015 to 30 are to completely eliminate extreme poverty in the whole world is one of them. And it's doable. There's a lot of progress happening in the world despite these difficulties. So look up clownswithoutborders.org. My personal website is comedytricks.com. Clownswithoutborders.org. So happy and proud to be part of this work and to be part of this presentation. Thanks a lot.
David, you have the most beautiful soul. Thank you so much for everything you've been able to accomplish and what you've taught us today. I would very much like to, acknowledge your work as a performer as well as a humanitarian. Truly, such kindness, such goodness, and so many things you said. Just so many quotes that we can all take away. Truly, how do we make a better world? And we really are all connected. But this whole idea of being intense and how intense the world is right now, right? So social clowning, lots of people were saying, please do not dismiss the power of your work in comparison to doctors. Valerie said, we all need some of this joy right now. So, all righty, we're going to move on because we want to make sure all the speakers have time, and we're going to have time for Q&A. So again, meeting trauma with laughter, clearly we need this right now. I've always enjoyed your Leap and Louie shows here in Portland, and now we'll even be more committed to supporting Clowns Without Borders. I do have some general questions that are listed here. So let's talk a little bit about this deeper question about how you use your art. Do you see it as a form of service or activism? Like, what part's political, or how do you stay neutral? This element about art, how can art create a safe or neutral space to discuss complex political-sided issues?
We have, Clowns Without Borders is a service organization. We try not to be political. We end up being political anyway sometimes. On the project I did in Palestine, this amazing Palestinian theater company brought us to a lot of hotspots where we got to see places where they're trying to drive the Palestinians off the land very actively. And we blogged about what we saw, and actually that created controversies. We got objections to what was on our website from those blogs. The Palestine 2014 blog is really nice. I think artists are hopefully going to help lead our way to doing things better. We got to be learning. And basically, you have to touch people's emotions. you can't logic people into change very much. You have to touch people's emotions, and I think artists play a key role in doing that, in getting people with their emotions.
Mm-hmm. David, since you're speaking right now, Caitlin asked another question. She said she'd love to hear more about this experience and the insight you had around humbling ourselves and finding our weaknesses when engaging with people that are suffering abroad, speaking different languages, or having different life understandings.
Well, it's a clown principle that you find your weaknesses and you use them as your, you turn yourself inside out and you make your weaknesses what you show to the world. It's a special kind of vulnerability. Mm-hmm. And so that's what we do in the art of clowning. And I guess related there is when we're traveling as more privileged people to these places, we often end up talking about how hard things are, that 250,000 people die in an earthquake, point out the wonderful things that are happening in the countries we visit. I mean, Haiti had the best radio I've ever heard in my life. You're just going from station to station on the AM. It's just the most amazing music. People were so generous and so full and so present and so in your face.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, that's the best I can answer that.
No, it's amazing. And again, so wise. There was one final question, and I hope that you're also reading the chat pages. You guys are getting tons of accolades. People adore what you're offering, so this is really important. I had a question on there about what's next. So David, what's next for you? And then we'll say Emily and Amy, and then we'll wrap up.
Well, I'm actually creating a biology diversity show. So I'm working with Mary Nagler, puppeteer, to create a 5-foot-long giant nudibranch that I can
yes.
riding around, and love the colors of the netting, the found netting. It's amazing. It's such beautiful art. So that's what I'm working on, is trying to create that biology show and a bunch of physical and visual materials to go with it. I want to teach 600 million years of life evolution in 60 minutes.
It's important to be aspirational. It's important.
You can do it.
Oh my God, you're going to be the total new Bill Nye the Science Guy. I'm so excited for you. Okay. So our final slides, we're going to wrap up here. We want to just thank you for everybody participating in the Q&As. We were able to read from the chat page. Again, if you have more questions, we will have this recorded. We will do a follow-up with all of our participants, and anyone who is registered will send you the resources list. There's more in the resources list than you have just here, but here are their emails and their websites. You can check out their art on all of those sites, actually, or support them. Of course, this is a time we want to be supporting our talented folks around the world.
First of all, I just want to say thank you to Shelby, Emily, David, and Amy. Thank you very much. It was a pleasure to hear you. A lot of things to learn from all of you. And thanks to everyone who joined. It started very well with Shelby's question, why does art matter? And I want to conclude by at least some takeaways that I had from hearing all of you. To me, what I was hearing is art is the thread, it's the DNA, it's the thing that connects us. And it helps us remember our past. It helps us look to the future. It helps us be present and honor what we have. It helps us to find abundance. It helps us to identify generosity within ourselves. It helps us to use that space to rehabilitate. It helps us to identify each of us, whether we are a refugee, a migrant, a somebody, a nobody, but it connects all of us through this one thing, the humanity of laughter, of being able to see, experience many amputations around and many plankton and much ocean being imbued in the things that we don't want, but we still see hope in our humanity, in our ability to and thank you, Amy, for that word, and in our ability to connect to Adama, another word I learned from you, Amy, to bear witness to the biology show that's coming up, and to the metamorphosizing process that we are all going through as we see everything that's happening in Minneapolis, everything that's happening with COVID, everything that's happening in Bombay, it's happening in Peru, it's happening here. It helps us connect. It helps us to come back home to yourself, to wherever we are geographically. It helps us to make that reflection on Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And then it helps us to be rooted where we are and to understand, yes, we are all parts of DNA. Yes, we are all just a bunch of amino acids. But then, hey, we are all, as much as we say we are in this together, we are not all proportionally together in this. So for those of us who can give through art, those of us who can receive through art, this has been a pleasure. And I want to say, just like the Sustainable Development Goals, which is very interconnected, art is that thread that connects us all to identify a bigger space beyond ourselves, and also identify that bigger space within ourselves. So thank you all for joining, and thank you all artists for doing the work you do and going across borders, and really to tell us that there are no borders. Thank you very much.
Oh, Neerja. I love you. You're so wise, and you always do capture these gorgeous final, like these, you can encapsulate the ideas often into poetry and then beauty of philosophy, and obviously your specialties within agroecology. And so thank you to our Executive Director of GPSEN, Neerja Havaligi. And I'm going to do just a few final changes here between their slides. I know we're a couple minutes over, so I hope you'll just stay with us so we can actually acknowledge our sponsors and our presenters, and recognizing that had our symposium actually been at PCC Cascade as planned, they've been very, very helpful. We have our media partners with KBOO and Green Living Journal, our United Nations Association partnerships, and we would have also had wine as a at our reception. So Seven Sails Vineyard, Christopher Bridge, check them out if you can. Thanks to everyone who's helped make our Sustainability Symposium series possible, including our Programs and Events Committee. If any of you feel called to support GPSEN's programs and events, again, the Greater Portland Sustainability Education Network, you can go to gpsen.org to help donate and support the work. Please do check us out at gpsen.org. And remember that each and every person here who's on this call, every presenter, you're incredible educators. You've taught us how to empower ourselves and others, and some really fascinating ways to engage. So blessings to all of you. Phew, I know, right? Deep sigh.
I love all of you so much. So much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you,
No utter
Kim.
joy. You're welcome. You're welcome. Okay, I'm gonna set people free.